everybody, this is the Wikstrand. So there is a perception that action movies nowadays are bad, and I will somehow agree with that. Either they go, so far in one direction and they become so grim and so dark that there is no real fun watching it. On the other hand, they get so cartoonish and they get so light-hearted that they have no weight to them, they have no oomph to them. And you can say whatever you want to about the landscape today when it comes to entertaining action movies, but you cannot say that things weren't fucking better in the 80s and the 90s. I wouldn't say the 2000s because that was a dark time for, traditional action movies. But do you know a place where you can still get fan-freaking-tastic action movies? The Asian continent. The last, decade or so has basically proven that you don't need budgets, you don't need big explosions, you don't even need real stars really to make a fantastic action movie. You just need to do something that puts emotion into you and you feel, oh, kill that motherfucker. So that's what we're gonna find out today. Which truly is the greatest Asian action movie that has ever been made. This is gonna be quite a fun list to do, so let's not waste any time, shall we? This is my list of the 10 greatest Asian action movies of all time. For this must be the following. It has to be an all-out Asian production. It cannot be, a American, Japanese production or something like that. And it has to be in the local language. And it also has to be an action movie. It cannot contain too much historical drama, science fiction, fantasy, and I will not have any traditional martial arts movies in this. There is sometimes a small line where movies could fall on either side of what I would approve or not. So here is a couple of honorable mentions. All of these movies are technically good enough to be on the actual list, but because they contain either too much fantasy, too much comedy, too much historical drama aspect and stuff like that, they cannot be on this list. But I want to mention them anyway because they are absolutely amazing. The Seven Samurais. This is essentially the birth of the action movie. Some say that a lot of things that we today take for granted in action movies was invented by Akira Kurosawa with this absolute stone-cold masterpiece. It is, however, more of a historical drama than it is an action movie, which means that it cannot be on this list, but it is still a movie that is absolutely fantastic, even though some people might struggle with its very, very excessive runtime, but I think this movie is absolutely great. 13 Assassins. Takashi Miike's absolute best movie of all time. It's also one of my favorite Japanese movies of all time. It is essentially a bunch of samurais gathered together to kill an evil warlord and then they execute the plan. Once again, this is actually more of a historical drama thing, but some of the action sequences in this movie is quite breathtaking, and it is such a bonkers movie that it kind of almost went into this list, but I had to disqualify this movie because it is too much of a historical drama. But my god, is the action fantastic. My god, is there a lot of preparations and a lot of tension going into this one, and the execution of it is absolutely flawless. This is compelling, fantastic viewing. The only thing I wish they could have had was a bit more blood, but that's because I'm a psychopath. Bahubali. Part 1 and Part 2, of course. Bahubali is one of the greatest movies that I've ever seen in my entire life. It is such a fantastic journey, and it will take you roughly 5 hours and then some to get to the movie's amazing ending, where they slowly ramp up the insanity step by step and scene by scene to give you a captivating fantasy adventure that looks like nothing you've ever seen. It is so big. It is such a fantastic, incredible epic with such amazing side characters, such visual storytelling, and also the single greatest cliffhanger I have ever seen in my entire life. It is so amazing that it still puts chill in my spine whenever I think about it. Also, the title sequence for this movie is the greatest thing I've ever seen. It is so big that you need, big elephant herds and stuff like that to pull up the fucking letters to the movie. That's how big this fucking movie is. And it is such an amazing experience to watch. However, this is a fantasy adventure war type of movie. And simply put, it is a bit too much of that rather than a action movie, so that's why it's off the list. Brotherhood of War. Why this movie is off the list is of course because this is essentially the South Korean version of Saving Private Ryan or The Thin Red Line or whatever you want to make the comparison to. This is a movie about the Korean War and about two brothers who get separated and try to find each other, and it is such an emotional story. It looks fantastic, apart from a couple of sequences where the special effects looks a little bit poor, but these are minor smudges, and it is a great history lesson, even though I don't know how historically accurate it is, but it is fantastic action sequences, great war sequences, an amazing pace with fantastic characters, and that ending. Oh my god, that ending. Hero. One of the most beautiful movies I have ever seen. I am so grateful that I got to experience this movie in the cinema. This is perhaps the single greatest martial arts movie that has ever been made. It has nothing to do with reality, it has nothing to do with logic, it is simply put 100% visual storytelling with some of the most mind-bending, eye-catching sequences that you will ever see ever. Jet Li's greatest movie, and a movie perhaps short on plot, but on the other hand, what it compensates it with is its visual, and it is so stunning and it is so amazing that you cannot look away from it. It is simply breathtaking. Ichi the Killer. Basically the opposite of what Hero is. Ichi the Killer is a hard to describe version of a manga which depicts a serial killer's hunt for basically another serial killer within some of the, Yakuza mobs in Tokyo. And it might be the most violent movie I've ever seen in my entire life, to the point where the violence goes so over the top that it actually becomes silly, and the bad special effects actually helps this movie along somehow. I don't know how they did it, but it is a movie that you will never forget once you've seen it. There has never been a movie like Ichi the Killer, and there will never be another movie like Ichi the Killer. Maybe that is for the best. The movie is very controversial, actually carrying prison sentences in some countries if being found. This is a movie unlike anything else you have ever seen. And it is difficult sometimes to actually look at this one and not go, oh god, I can stomach almost anything. There are some sequences in this movie that I cannot watch. Sometimes even I have to hide behind a pillow for this movie because Jesus Christ! Kesari. This is essentially the Indian version of 300. It is basically a bunch of Sikh soldiers on the border with Afghanistan who faces an enormous army of Afghan warriors coming in that is trying to invade India, but there is this little pesky fort that stands in front of them that simply won't budge. And this is essentially the story of what's going to happen. The movie has essentially the simplest of storytelling. Build up these characters and make them the most sympathetic baby faces you have ever seen. Then have them die martyr deaths in slow motion for 1.5 hours and then call it a day, because it is one of the most great and visceral movies you will ever see. In the end, you will literally scream and punch in the air because it is such an amazing experience to watch. And it's based on a true story, and you can visit the monuments in northern India to see it, because it is such an amazing story. And this movie is so good that you forget how over the top this movie is. That's how good this filmmaking is for this movie. Lady Snowblood. I would guess that Quentin Tarantino has seen this movie a number of times, because it contains a lot of the things that we see in classical Tarantino movies. It is a fantastic revenge tale. It is an amazing story. It's a great and captivating revenge tale. And I do love myself a great revenge tale. And few comes better than this. This is fucking great. Steel Rain. So war breaks out between North and South Korea. This is essentially a Tom Clancy story told in a South Korean context. It is big, it's spectacular, it has fantastic acting, it has great characters, it has great action sequences, but it is essentially more of a war thriller type of a movie rather than an action movie. That's why it is on this list, but it is just such a spectacular movie. If you've never seen it, I really do recommend it. The Battle of Red Cliff. I have actually only seen the international version of this movie, but if you want to see a big and spectacular war picture directed by John Woo with great characters, fantastic battle sequences, look no further to this thing. I love this type of movies, and if done correctly, as it is in this, it can be a truly amazing viewing experience. And if you've never seen this, this is one of John Woo's forgotten classics that people doesn't talk about anymore. But in my humble opinion, it's one of the greatest movies that he has ever done. And we might see John Woo actually on the list later, but let's move on now, shall we, to the good, the bad, the weird. This is essentially the South Korean version of The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. And it is almost as good. We basically have, three people that is chasing a secret somewhere in the desert of Manchuria, with lots of, side characters and side plots that somehow benefits the story. Trio of characters, an amazing bunch of great action set pieces, but this is too much of an adventure movie to really qualify as a bona fide action movie, but it is compelling viewing, breakneck pace, and I love the ending. There are some sequences that I think stole a little bit too much from The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, but if you can live with that, you have one of the greatest modern adventure movies to look forward to that has ever been made. I love this movie so much. Zatoichi. Apparently there is a lot of Zatoichi movie that has been made over the years, but I've only seen this one by Beat Kitano, and it is a fantastically bonkers and odd little movie about, the classical tale of a blind swordsman that comes in to settle scores in, some town. It basically feels like a classical Kurosawa movie, but it is a little bit different, and there is some odd humor and some odd sequences in this movie that makes it a little bit, what the hell is going on here? Not everybody will appreciate this movie, but I think it is absolutely fantastic, with sequences I've never seen in any other movie, with great action set pieces, and actually a couple of good dance numbers thrown into this thing for some reason. It is an odd viewing, but it is too much of a black comedy drama-esque tale to really be an action movie, but there is certainly no shortage of action in this movie. Just that it is not quite that. But I think if you go to see one of the Zatoichi movies, I guess this is probably the best, even though I don't know how many other it has been made or if they're any good or not. But this one was certainly a fantastic viewing experience. Number 10. Ong Bak. Well, this movie, some would argue that this movie shouldn't technically be on this list because this is a traditional martial arts movie, if I've ever seen one. A kid from the rural countryside comes into the big city to, fix a crime that has been committed against them, and, gets into all sorts of problems and stuff like that. And that is basically what this movie is. Because Tony Jaa comes to Bangkok to kick all sorts of shit when they have, stolen this idol thing from their village. And this movie is just 100% bone-crunching, ass-kicking throughout. There is a sort of long kind of slow intro to this one, but it's more actually to get us more hyped for the movie that we're going to see. And I can very vividly remember when I watched this in the cinema, there was this guy who had brought in his date with him to this movie. Out of all fucking movies, I can almost guarantee there was no sex that night for that guy, because, she said when, the fight breaks out in the bar, that's like the second or maybe third fight in the movie. Oh no, another fight. And I was thinking, Jesus Christ, I think we have at least 10 more to go before this one is over, and I don't think I exaggerated that number. Ong Bak is an incredibly entertaining, fast-paced movie filled with incredible stunts, incredible fight sequences, a great chase throughout Bangkok on tuk-tuks, which looks fucking ridiculous. And I love how, you see all the stunts from various, angles, just to show that there was no trickery done here. The agility of some of these stuntsmen are absolutely breathtaking. My God, this was just so much fun. Too bad that the sequels really couldn't capture the magic of this one, and too bad Tony Jaa never became, a big star in Hollywood and, following like a Jet Li or a Jackie Chan or something like that. But my God, is this movie absolutely fantastic. Number 9. Hard Boiled. Hello, John Woo. It's not the last time we're going to see you on this list. So John Woo's Hong Kong movies that he did before he, transitioned into Hollywood and then transitioned back into China. Of those movies, this is one of his absolute gold standards, and it is a gold standard when it comes to Hong Kong action movies, which it was known as at the time. This is just a fantastic movie starring Chow Yun-fat at the top of his game, doing what he does best, shooting people. The movie also has a fun story with a great villain, and that climax in the hospital is freaking amazing. If you're thinking about, John Woo as the inventor of, as they say, the terrible beauty, it doesn't come much more terrible than this one, and it doesn't come more beautiful than this one, with his fantastic shootouts, his fantastic action sequences, and these absolutely badass, awesome characters that you are willing to follow wherever they go. And that 2-minute uninterrupted action sequence inside the hospital is just, oh my God. Whew. I'm getting sweaty just by thinking about it. Number 8. War. In the United States, they have, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and they have, the DC Universe and stuff like that. But in India, they have this spy-verse, or whatever you want to call it. It is basically a bunch of really, really high-octane, old-fashioned, spy agent action movies, where they, fly around the world and kick all sorts of ass, against terrorists and, infiltrators. And we have, the intelligence and, people sitting at desks and, says that you're gonna kill this guy and stuff like that. And, people from different movies, do guest appearances in the other people's movies. This is not, movies that you have to see this movie to understand what happened in that movie. You don't need to see, Tiger 3 to understand why Pathan is a big deal. Shah Rukh Khan just shows up in that ridiculous sequence in, the prison in Pakistan, and you kind of, okay, there's Shah Rukh Khan. Now it's going to be awesome. And the best movie in this entire thing is War. War is on the surface just another, Tom Clancy-ish story about, this guy who is, trying to redeem himself, and, him joining this team, and they're chasing off these, evildoers, and there's all sorts of chicanery happening. It probably wouldn't be on this list if it wasn't for one thing. This movie has an almost, I wouldn't say crying game levels of twist, but it is kind of similar to it, but it's sort of an, oh, I didn't see that thing coming. It was so brilliant, and it was so cleverly done that when you rewatch the movie, you sitting there and thinking, there it is, there it is. I love War so much, but I can tell you that in Sweden, which this movie's climax takes place of, in all places, also in Finland, our icebreakers do not have ramps to fit, missiles on, and it's not possible to, load sports cars so you can drive across the frozen ice and stuff like that. But this movie is just filled to the brim with fantastic, chaotic, beautiful, over-the-top action sequences, which is something that India has become so good at that they nowadays pretty much outclasses anything that Hollywood does. War is just another example of an absolutely fantastic action movie with great performances, but it doesn't forget that it can still surprise you. It's not just a stupid brain-dead action movie. It is actually a very clever little thriller hidden in here, but you don't see it until you see it. 7. 2009 Lost Memories. This movie is a very curious one. Now, this movie almost didn't make the list either because, you know, of the sci-fi elements that they have, you know, with the time travel and the, you know, altered future and stuff like that. But the thing is that this movie is a movie I can watch over and over and over again, because we have, you know, this alternate future where Japan won World War II and, you know, taken over the entirety of the Korean peninsula. And we have these two cops that are trying to find out why this, you know, terrorist group is, you know, targeting these places. And for some reason, this leads him into a gigantic conspiracy that is so cleverly done and is so smartly made that you're sitting there thinking, my God, this is how you do time travel things. This is how you do a movie with alternate realities and stuff like that. It is so subtle, and you have such compelling characters, and you have amazing action sequences accompanied with the most over-the-top operatic dramatic music that you could ever hope to find. And if that is something that you think is, you know, right up your alley, this is something that I think that you should definitely watch. This is a very, very cool movie. Compelling characters, a great finish. Maybe some of the special effects have aged quite a bit, but on the other hand, I still think that this movie has such a, you know, fascinating story that I'm willing to take those, you know, in favor of this very, very unique story that they're telling, because you never see what's coming until it is coming. Number 6, The Villainess. This is basically La Femme Nikita if it would have been a South Korean thriller. This is a fantastic action movie that starts with an, you know, POV shot that is one of the most cool, badass things I've ever seen. Now, they have done cool, badass, you know, POV shots before, like for instance Hardcore Henry, which is a movie that consists entirely of you know, a POV shot from the start to the finish. I think that movie is actually kind of underrated of how awesome it is. This movie just is the first like 2.5 minutes, and it is such a great movie. And when you see, you know, this woman and, you know, her backstory and how she becomes a, you know, assassin and all the things that is going on in her life, it is such a compelling story. And you also have one of the most heart-wrenchingly horrible sequences I have ever seen. The only reason why this movie isn't higher on the list is the fact that the ending was a little bit flat. When you start a movie with one of the most awesome action sequences you have ever seen and ends it with the third best action sequence in the entire movie, then it just becomes a little bit eh. So while this movie has fantastic characters, a great story, great dark humor, an odd story that somehow still kind of fits together, it's a little bit of a shame that it isn't better as it is when it comes to the finish. But up until then, my God, it is damn near flawless. Number 5, The Killer. This is John Woo's greatest Hong Kong movie he has ever done. It's not his best movie, that would be Face Off, but that is a story for another time. I love this movie so much. This is a weird combination of bromance and bloodbath. In fact, the movie's original title, I think, is supposed to be, you know, Two Heroes Bloodbath, because equal amounts of time is spent, you know, on this cop that is trying to catch Chow Yun-fat's murderer, and you know, them eventually teaming up together in order to try to, you know, save the eyesight of a victim of Chow Yun-fat. It is such a tragedy, and it is such a glorious sequences that is everything I love about John Woo. And that finish in that church, you thought that Hard Boiled had a fantastic climax. Hold My Very Bloody Mary, says John Woo, and has maybe one of the single greatest climaxes I've seen in any action movie. When this thing just happens, you just go and see, oh my God, they're gonna do it. My God, it is so amazing. I love the ending so much. The finale to the finale might not be the greatest thing of all time, but still, this is a movie that has almost no flaws to it. It is beautiful, it is compelling, it has fantastic villains. Some sequences might be a bit too gnarly for some people, but for me, this is an almost perfect movie. Number 4. Jawan. So Shah Rukh Khan made his glorious return to Bollywood royalty in 2023 with the movie Pathan. But later that year he would make a movie that was even better. Jawan, which is a weird combination of, you know, a heist movie, a war movie, a action movie and a buddy cop comedy at the same time, and it is so entertaining with fantastic song and dance numbers, completely out there action sequences, fantastic villains, and also the nicest woman prison you've ever seen in your entire life. Plus the pickup of the corner gets to show up and they get to do stuff together. It is so great, and the characters are so fantastic, and the chemistry between all of our characters, not just Shah Rukh Khan and basically anybody who shares, you know, screen with, but also, you know, with his cohort that is helping him pull off these very, very silly and very, very cool weird heists, you know, these girls in the prison. This is a movie that is difficult really to describe what it is about, but when you see it, you very, very rapidly, you know, get into it because you don't quite know where this thing is going. This movie is also responsible for one of the coolest twists I've ever seen. It is so logical, and it is so crowd-pleasing, and it comes just so out of nowhere that you just go, huh, that is totally insane, and I love it. It's not quite as awesome like in the movie Simba, where simply a different character just jumps into the movie mid-movie and says, hey, I'm here now to rescue. It would basically be like if you would have a Dirty Harry movie, and Dirty Harry is, you know, tied to this chair, and you have these, you know, scumbags who are trying to kill him, and, you know, they're discussing how to kill him, and then all of a sudden a car just flies through the window. It jumps down and out steps James Bond. Dun, 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 dun. That was basically what happened in Simba. This was not quite as awesome, but my god, it was a fantastic sequence, and it also injected so much adrenaline into this movie that I just went, ah, this is so fucking great. This is one of the greatest Indian movies I have ever seen. It is fast-paced, it has compelling characters, it has fantastic action sequences, it has weird humor that somehow works, and some of the greatest song and dance number I've seen in recent years. Shah Rukh Khan is fucking king. Number 3. Asumi. If you don't like the visual of somebody is, you know, cutting somebody with a samurai sword, you're not going to like this movie, because that is basically what this entire movie is about. It is based on a manga that I haven't read about this, you know, young kids who are being trained to become assassins and then being sent into the world, and everything doesn't work out quite as, you know, the masters intended. We have fantastic villains. My god, the villains in this movie are just so great. Compelling characters, great pace, great characters, fantastic cinematography, and fantastic choreography on our you know, fights. And if somebody wants to ask, well, why is this movie here and not 13 Assassins? To that thing I say essentially that that was more of a historical drama rather than an historical action movie. Asumi has nothing to do with feudal Japan's history, or at least I think so. This is a very fun movie that just moves 100 miles an hour with fantastic characters and that amazing ending. Mwah! That's great. Number 2. RRR. No, it is not as great as Bahubali, but it almost is. This is a completely insane movie that just came out of nowhere and just got everybody talking about this. Like, this was, simply put, a fantastic slam dunk hit that is almost perfect. Essentially, you can say that this movie is basically taken on fucking steroids, because we have these two incredible warriors who doesn't know that they're supposed to hate each other, but then discovers that they have to hate each other, and then they discover that they have to help each other in order to, you know, help this little girl from this poor little village. And the British are so delightfully evil. The fantastic song and dance numbers and some of the visuals are so astonishing that you're just sitting back and saying, oh my God. Now this guy, he has to make like a Marvel movie or a Star Wars movie or some kind of a, big budget Hollywood movie. Imagine what he could do with it. This movie is just so over the top. The number of fantastic sequences are too many to even talk about. But one of my favorite sequences in the entire movie is the sequence when we have to whip our hero, and when the evil governor's wife thinks that the whipping isn't good enough, she has a more evil whip with spikes and stuff that she throws at him, and he has to whip him with that thing. It is so over the top, but also it just gives you that feeling, it just gives you that emotional connection to them, because this bromance they have is just so compelling. You don't want them to fight each other, but eventually they are going to have to do it. But then, what happens if they somehow would, come over their differences and team up? What could ever stop them? This is 3 hours, just vanishes. I've never seen 3 hours vanish this quickly, I think. It is a movie that you will never forget once you've seen it. It is just such a joy to watch. I can watch this over and over and over again. I, keep seeing small new little details, and then I think, oh, here comes this sequence, and oh, here comes this sequence, and oh, here comes this sequence. Oh, I'm getting giddy just from thinking about it. But there is one movie that is even better and gives me even more of the woohoo, we're going now. And that is, of course, number one, The Raid 2. It might be a predictable choice, but hot doggity damn, this movie is everything I love about action movies. It is a compelling story, we have compelling characters, we have, a grand, epic gangster movie. We don't have too many, unnecessary side plots, and those side plots that we have, they are so good that I don't mind them. And then we have the 3 stages of absolute insanity in the end. When we have, 40, maybe 45 minutes left of this thing, we're just thinking, well, this is really, really good. It is better than the first one. I don't know how they could make this even more exciting. Then the car chase starts, and then everything just went to absolute overdrive, and you're thinking, wow, that was so fucking cool. And then we go into the warehouse to have that fantastic mega brawl, which is basically Ouch City. And then you're thinking, my God, it can't get any better than this. And then, we have the showdown with a baseball guy and Hammer Girl, and when that thing is over with, you are ready basically to light a cigarette, because Jesus Christ, how can anything be better than this thing? And then we have the fight in the kitchen. I've said this before. This is the greatest one-on-one confrontation that has happened in a movie that I've ever seen. The fight they have is so brutal, and it is so cool, and it is so awesome, and it is so chaotic that even if it is completely ridiculous, you feel every punch, you feel every beat, and my God, the cleanup in that kitchen afterwards, it's gonna be fucking enormous. The Raid 2 is a perfect action movie. 2.5 hours just whooshes by. And like RRR, I can watch this movie over and over and over again, and it never gets boring, and it never gets repetitive, and I can always find new things to see. I mean, the story of, infiltrating this gang might not be, the most original thing that's ever been made, but it is how it is made. It is just such an amazing, monolithical spectacle to watch, and my God, that movie is fucking great. So which one is your favorite? Comment below, and I'll see you next time from, well, so-and-so reviewing, well, such and such. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much.